The exile. The wind was cold and sharp like broken glass. It moved across the dry ground of the dead moon without mercy. The sky above was black and full of stars, but no light came from them. Only silence and cold. She walked slowly, her arms wrapped around her two children. Both small, both shaking, both crying without sound. They were too tired to cry now. Too afraid. Her name was Zira, once a respected scientist in the Varelian Empire. Now nothing, now trash, thrown out from her own people like a broken tool. She had done something they could not forgive, something they called unnatural. She had loved her children. She had held them, kissed them, told them stories, things no Varelian should ever do. Because in her world, emotions were a disease. Weakness, danger. Her children were different. They were born with emotions. They smiled. They laughed. They dreamed. The elders saw them as damaged. Her own people called them flawed flesh. She had begged the High Council for mercy, but they only looked at her with cold, glowing eyes. They gave her 1 hour to leave with her children, or they would be taken and erased. Now she walked on this moon. The same moon where criminals were left to die. No water, no food, no help. Just stones and ice and the long scream of wind. Her skin was turning pale from the cold. Her feet bleeding from the sharp ground. Her children held onto her arms like roots to a dying tree. She whispered soft words to them. Words that made no sense but felt warm, like light inside darkness. She did not care that they were dying. She only cared that they were not alone, that they were still together. Maybe that was her final hope, just to die as a mother. Not a monster, but then something strange happened. A sound, not from the wind, not from her mind. It was like metal breaking. Like fire touching the sky. She looked up and saw it. A bright shape falling from the stars. Fire all around it. Falling fast, burning the sky above her. It screamed across the moon and hit the ground far away. So hard the earth shook under her feet. She covered her children and waited. Silence returned, but her heart was not calm. Something had come from the sky. Not a Varelian ship. No, they used dark crystal and silent engines. This was different, loud, angry, alive. She waited a while. Then she stood and began to walk toward the crash. Every step harder than the last. But her eyes were locked on the smoke rising in the distance. Maybe it was death, maybe it was hope, but she had nothing left to lose. It took her hours, or maybe longer. Time had no meaning on this moon. But finally she reached the broken metal thing. It was a ship, small, strange, not like anything she knew. Its surface was black and red, and steam came from its sides, a flag painted near the door. A blue circle with white stars. Words in a language she had never seen. She stepped closer. Afraid but curious, inside she heard a sound, a voice, not a machine, not a drone. A living voice, coughing, trying to breathe. She opened the hatch and saw Ida creature. Lying on the floor, bleeding, its skin soft pink, its eyes half closed. Its suit broken. It looked at her, tried to speak. Its voice weak and dry. She stared at it. Never before had she seen such a being. It was not Varelian, not even close. It was human. The stories were true then, the old forbidden stories. Of a race from a distant star who felt deep emotions. Who fought not for logic, but for love. A race the Varelians feared and denied. She moved closer. Her children hid behind her legs, afraid. But she raised her hand and touched the strange creature's forehead. It was burning hot. Its body shaking. It needed help. She looked at the supplies near the wall, pulled out a tube of liquid and gave it to him. He drank a little, then closed his eyes again. Breathing slower, now Zira sat beside him. The door closed behind her. Outside the cold waited. But inside was warmth, even if it was small and broken. She looked at her children. Then at the human. Maybe this was not the end. Maybe this was the beginning of something no one could imagine. She did not know his name. He did not know hers, but in that broken ship, in the middle of death and exile, something new was born, a spark, a chance asterisk inside. The broken ship, everything was quiet, except the slow breathing of the wounded creature, and the soft sound of Zira's children sleeping in the corner. Covered in a silver blanket that was warm like sunlight, trapped in cloth, the ship was damaged, but it was still better than the cold death. Waiting outside, Zira sat near the human who had fallen from the sky, his face pale, his body shaking. Sometimes he opened his eyes and looked at her, not with fear, but with confusion and pain. He tried to speak again, but she did not understand the words. They were soft and strange, like music from another world. She watched him closely. His movements were slow but careful. He did not attack. He did not growl like the soldiers from her world. He looked at her children, and something changed in his face. It was a kind of sadness mixed with something warmer. She remembered the old forbidden stories, the ones told in secret between rebels and dreamers, stories about humans, creatures of fire and feeling, warriors and builders and protectors, who cried when they loved and roared when they lost. Zira never believed those tales until now. This human was broken, but alive, and something deep inside her told her that he was not her enemy. He tried again to speak, raising one hand, pointing to himself, then tapping his chest and saying a name. Slowly, clearly, like he wanted her to remember it. Ray, he said, then again, slower. Ray. She looked at him confused. He pointed to her and waited. She understood. Then this was a name. This was how they shared who they were. She touched her chest gently and said, Zira. He smiled. It was weak but real, and for the first time since her exile she felt something rise inside her, something warm and dangerous. Hope. The ship's walls shook a little from the cold wind outside, but the lights inside glowed gently. The air was breathable. The heat was stable. It was like a miracle. Ray slowly sat up. Holding his side, he winced in pain but kept moving. He opened a metal case near his seat and pulled out a small box with flashing lights. He pressed a few buttons, and a voice came out, speaking in his language, then a soft tone, and the voice spoke again, this time in her own. Zira stared in shock. The machine was translating their words. She said, thank you, slowly, carefully, watching his reaction. He nodded once, then said many words quickly, most of which the translator did not catch, but a few came through. Broken but clear, crash ship, broken, hurt, help children, cold, danger. Soon she understood the meaning. Even if the words were not perfect, they were in danger. The ship would not last forever. Something was coming, and they needed to move. Zira told him about the Varelians and how they would return soon, how they always searched the exile moons, looking for signs of rebellion or escape, how they would kill him if they found him, how they would take her children and erase them. Ray's eyes narrowed, not in fear but in anger. He shook his head slowly, then pointed to the back of the ship. He stood with effort and limped toward a hidden panel on the floor. He opened it, revealing a small, damaged escape pod. Its surface scratched, its door slightly open but still usable. He pointed to it, then at the sky, then at her and the children. He wanted them to leave together. Zira looked at the pod, then at her children, who were now awake, watching everything with wide, glowing eyes. She did not know if the pod could fly. She did not know if this human could be trusted. But she knew one thing: the cold outside would kill them. The Varelians would kill them. Staying meant death. This stranger falling from the sky might be their only chance to live. She helped Ray climbed down into the pod, her hands steady, his hands warmer than she expected. Together, they checked the controls. Many buttons were dead, but a few still blinked with light. Translator said flight system damaged, but possible short range only. Energy low risk, high chance crash. Ray smiled again, a strange kind of smile, like someone who had seen death before, and laughed. At it, he whispered something. The translator caught only 2 words worth. Trying. Zira nodded, her hands shaking, her heart loud inside her chest. They brought the children into the pod, wrapped them tightly, secured them with belts. Ray showed her how to strap in, how to hold the lever, how to not let go, no matter what. They sat together, the walls around them humming with weak power. The pod began to rise, slowly shaking from every side, dust falling from the roof above. Zira closed her eyes and remembered the last words the elders said to her before she was thrown away. Unworthy mother, failed citizen, broken soul. She opened her eyes and looked at Ray, who reached out and touched her hand gently. This time she felt something new, not fear, not sorrow, not anger. She felt a spark, something human, and she held on. The escape pod landed hard on a rocky cliff far from the crash site. Its body scratched its engine. Quiet but still breathing, the night was deep and filled with cold wind, but they had survived for now. They were not safe, but they were alive. That was enough for a beginning. Zira sat beside the human, who now leaned against a rock, his eyes closed, his breath slow but steady. The children slept in her arms, tired from fear and motion. The stars above them blinked like old eyes watching without care or mercy. The Varelians would come soon. They always came. Silence never lasted long under their rule. Patrol ships flew across the moon searching for broken laws and lost souls. And Zira had broken more than one rule. She had loved, she had protected. She had chosen her children over her duty. Ray opened his eyes and looked at her, his voice weak but clear enough. The translator spoke softly through the device on his chest. Power low, time short, need fix ship or die soon. She nodded, not because she agreed, but because she understood the cold truth around them. There were no friends, no shelter, no safety, only the rocks, the wind, and the long shadow of death. Coming closer with each hour, Ray stood slowly, pain in his side, but fire in his eyes. He moved to the side of the pod and opened a storage hatch. Inside were tools, wires, old circuits, and pieces of metal, some bent, some clean, but all full of purpose. He touched each item like a craftsman, not a soldier, not a pilot, but someone who made things work even when they were broken. He pointed to the horizon where sharp mountains cut the sky, then pointed to her, then to the children, then to the pod, then back to himself. Words flowed through the translator. Fix ship, fly, escape fast before they find us. Zira looked at the broken pieces and shook her head. Gently, it would not fly, not far, not high. The engine was cracked, the core was unstable, the steering was manual and old. But Ray was already working, his hands fast, his eyes focused, sweat on his forehead, his body slow, but his mind sharp. He handed her a wire and pointed to a panel she had never seen before. With no time to fear, she began to help, her hands moving with him. Side by side they worked through the night, firelight glowing from the engine, sparks jumping like stars. With each connection, her children watched quietly, no longer afraid, just silent and wide-eyed, trusting her, trusting him, trusting the plan. They did not understand. Suddenly, a sound broke the stillness, not from them, not from the engine, but from the sky, a hum like a blade sliding through air, sharp and cold. A Varelian drone. Zira froze. Ray stopped, both looking up at the red light moving above, scanning the rocks, searching, listening. She pulled the children into her arms and covered their faces. Ray grabbed a piece of metal and held it like a shield. The drone passed once, then twice, then stopped above them, hovering like a beast sniffing the wind. A long moment passed, then the red light blinked and the key lay. Drone turned slowly, flying toward the east. They breathed again, but not in relief, just in warning. Ray turned back to the pod faster now, his hands shaking with speed, not fear. He connected the final cable and the pod blinked with weak light. The engine hummed soft and uneven, but alive. The translator crackled again, working. Flight, maybe 10 minutes. Direction only west. Crash, maybe yes, but better than stay and die. Zira looked at the pod, then at the sky, then at Ray, who now looked like someone with nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. She placed the children back into the seats, strapping them in tight, their hands clutching hers, not speaking, but watching her face for answers. She did not have. Ray took the front control seat. Zira sat beside him, her heart pounding. The door closed around them, sealing out the wind and the world. The engine screamed as it came to life. The pod shook, the rocks below cracking as fire burst from the rear. The old machine lifted, uneven and groaning. But rising outside, the Varelian drones spun around its sensors, picking up the launch alert sent to its masters. Alarms now echoing across the moon. Inside the pod, Ray pulled the lever and shouted something short. The translator failed to catch the words, but she felt the meaning. Now or never. The pod flew west, low and wild, skimming the rocks, fire chasing them behind and hope pulling them forward. Zira held the children tight, her eyes locked on the window where stars danced and mountains rolled by like waves. She had no map, no promise, no future, only this strange broken man beside her and the strange broken ship that carried them But, in that moment, she believed not in safety, not in destiny, but in the will to try again and the fire of those who will not give up, and that was enough. The escape pod crashed into the edge of a broken valley, its body sliding across the stone ground, sparks flying in every direction, fire climbing the walls of metal as the engine died with a final roar. Zira held the children, closed their eyes, shut, their faces hidden against her chest, while Ray used his body to shield them from the impact. When the smoke cleared, silence returned, but not for long. Shadows moved at the top of the cliffs, sharp, tall, fast. Shapes in silver armor, glowing eyes like ice. No voices, only command signals buzzing through the air. The Varelian enforcers had found them. They came down like wind, not walking but gliding, their feet barely touching the earth as they surrounded the broken pod. Their weapons raised, their eyes locked on Zira, then on Ray. Zira stood holding her children, one hand raised in surrender, the other wrapped around her youngest, who cried without sound. The enforcers spoke not to her but into the air, and within moments a gate of light opened from the sky and swallowed them all. They woke inside the hall of judgment, cold light above, cold walls around, no chairs, no comfort, only watchers behind glass eyes, behind silence, and in the center the high Council of Varelia, 5 tall figures floating above the ground, wrapped in robes of silver and black, their faces hidden by helmets of thought. Zira stood alone now, the children taken to another room, Ray beside her, his arms bound by metal light, his wounds ignored by the guards, his eyes still burning with quiet fury. A voice filled the hall, not a voice of sound, but of force, a voice inside her mind, sharp and endless. You broke our laws. You loved what should not be loved. You protected what should not exist. You brought a human into our realm. You betrayed your kind. Zira spoke not with anger, but with strength, her words simple and sharp. I loved my children because they are mine. I saved the human because he saved us. I broke your laws because they are not just. The council said nothing for a long moment. Then the voice returned, cold as death. Your children will be cleansed and returned to the dust. The human will be studied, then discarded. You will be forgotten as if you never lived. Ray stepped forward, his bindings shaking, his voice rising against the silence. He spoke in his own tongue, words full of fire and defiance. The translator echoed them into the chamber. I am not your toy. I am not your experiment. I came here by accident. But I will not die in your prison. The council turned toward him, their eyes glowing brighter. A new voice entered the room, not from the council, not from a guard, but from behind the wall where the children had been held. A scream, Zira's scream. She ran without thinking through the wall of light that blocked her path. The guards moved too slow. She was faster than fear, her heart louder than their commands. She reached the chamber and saw them, the children crying, held by machines ready to erase them, their memories, their names, their dreams. She threw herself forward and knocked the machines away, her body wrapped around her children. Her voice now fire. I will not let you take them. The chamber shook, not from weapons, not from machines, but from within her. A power old and hidden, long asleep, awoke in her blood. Her hands glowed with light. Her thoughts became shields, her pain became walls. Ray broke his bindings as the light around Zira pulsed through the air, knocking the guards back, slamming the doors shut. He ran to her side, pulled the children close, and shouted a word she did not know but felt with her whole soul. Run. They ran through the halls, alarms now screaming across the citadel, red lights flashing, doors opening and closing, shadows chasing their feet, but they kept running. Zira held the children. Ray led the way, using stolen codes from a guard's device, every turn a trap, every second a choice between death and freedom. They reached the outer platform where a single ship waited. Old forgotten dust covering its wings, but still full of power. Ray jumped into the pilot's seat. Zira sealed the door. The children sat behind them, shaking but quiet. Engines roared, the sky opened. The ship lifted into the black below. The citadel burned, the council silent for once, their judgment shattered by something they never planned. For a mother's love, a stranger's courage, a spark that would not die as the stars swallowed them. Zira looked at Ray. He looked back and nodded. They had escaped the trial, but the war was only beginning. The stolen ship flew fast through the edge of Aurelian space, its engines hot with fire, its systems screaming from damage, its lights flickering, as if unsure whether to live or die. Zira held the controls tight, her hands steady, her breath shallow. The children strapped in behind her eyes, wide watching stars streak past like silver arrows. Ray sat beside her, his face pale, his body wounded, but his focus unbroken. His fingers danced across the navigation panel, every move fast, every choice sharp. Behind them the void cracked with alarms, enemy signals rising like angry waves, chasing them through the dark. Ahead was a hidden belt of debris, old ruins from a forgotten war, metal bodies floating without purpose, engines long dead, a perfect place to hide or to crash. Zira asked if he could guide them through. Ray looked at her, his face calm, his voice firm. He pointed toward the densest part of the belt and spoke through the translator. No signal in there. They cannot track us. We hide, we fix, or we fall. She nodded without fear. Fear had already burned out of her, only fire remained. The ship dove into the graveyard of metal, broken satellites. Torn ships, shattered drones drifted like ghosts and bones. The children stared at the wreckage, eyes full of questions they could not ask. The engines cooled, the lights dimmed. Ray slowed the ship between two massive husks and powered down everything. But life support silence fell again. They floated in the dark. Zira and Ray and the two children surrounded by silence and memory. Ray moved to the rear of the ship, pulled out a toolkit, and opened the access panel. Wires twisted like vine circuits, burned black. Zira joined him, working side by side. No words, only movement. Hours passed, or maybe longer. Time no longer mattered, only survival, only silence, only sparks and breath. Then a sound broke the stillness. Not an enemy, not an alarm, but a song, soft and slow, one of the children humming. A melody, something simple, something warm, something alive. Zira froze, her hands covered in grease, her heart tight. The child sang without fear, without shame, a song she once whispered in the deep night, when hope was just a word, and now it returned as truth. Ray stopped his work and listened. He did not speak, he just smiled and nodded as if he understood, even without knowing the notes. Power core flickered, then stabilized. The lights glowed stronger. The air turned warm again. They had a chance, but outside the wreck field, the Varelian scouts waited, scanning, listening, searching with eyes that never slept and orders that never changed. Destroy, erase, silence inside the ship. Ray opened a hidden compartment behind the control panel. He pulled out a strange device, small, dark, smooth, shaped like a mask. He handed it to Zira and spoke quietly. Translator said, stealth unit, old tech, last chance, makes us invisible, but only for minutes. Must fly low, must fly quiet, must trust. Zira took the mask, placed it near the main drive system, activated it, and watched. As the ship faded from the scanners, the children held each other tightly. Ray took the controls and pushed forward, the engines whispering. Instead of roaring, they slipped through the belt like a shadow passing through forgotten dreams. But nothing stays hidden forever. One of the Varelian drones caught a trace, a signal too faint, too old, but enough to chase the scent. The council had issued new orders: bring back the traitor, bring back the human, alive or dead. The rest did not matter. Ray saw the alert flash across the screen and looked at Zira. She saw it too, and did not wait. She moved to the weapons panel, pulled up the shields, aimed at the incoming signal. The drone arrived, fast, sharp wings, blades of sound cutting the space around. It had fired a beam of light that burned through metal and thought, but Zira fired back with fire of her own. The two machines danced in the dark light, crashing against shadow. Ray dodged between wreckage, twisted metal, breaking around them. The children, silent, eyes wide, holding onto hope like it was the last thing left. Zira hit the drone once, twice, fire bursting from its side. But it kept coming, its will not its own, but its hatred pure. Then something happened. The youngest child stood up, eyes glowing. Not with fear, but with something ancient. Hands raised, voice steady. The song returned, not as a whisper, but as a storm. The drone froze, sensors blinking, logic failing, something in the sound breaking its code. Ray fired the final shot. The drone exploded. Into silence the ship flew forward into the black, no longer hunted. Not for now. Zira turned and held her child, eyes full of tears, not from pain but from power. She looked at Ray, he looked at her. They both knew the truth. They were not running anymore. They were rising. The ship floated beyond the edge of Varelian space, its body marked by battles and fire, its wings bent but steady, its heart still burning with the will to fly. Ray sat in the pilot seat, his eyes fixed on the screen ahead. A single signal blinking in the dark blue and green, a planet turning slowly in the black. Zira stood beside him, her hand resting gently on her child's head. Both children quiet, both watching the same screen, their faces full of something new, not fear, not sorrow, but wonder. Ray turned to them, his voice low but calm, translator crackling with quiet excitement. We are here, this is Earth. Ship broke through the clouds, fire dancing along its sides, light rushing past the windows. The children gasped, eyes wide. As oceans appeared, mountains stretching across the land, rivers glowing under sunlight like silver threads woven through green. They had never seen color like this. They had never seen a world that smiled. The ship landed in a hidden base deep in a forest where trees touched the sky and birds sang without fear. People waited, not with weapons, but with open hands and curious eyes. Soldiers, doctors, scientists, standing in silence as the door opened and the stranger stepped. Ray stepped down. First his arm bandaged, his face tired but proud behind him. Zira followed, holding the children close, their eyes searching every shape, every sound, every soul. No alarms, no shouting, just wind in the trees and footsteps in the grass. A woman stepped forward, her hair silver, her eyes sharp but kind. She wore no armor, only knowledge, her voice soft as rain. Welcome to Earth, she said, her translator clear and warm. You are safe now. Zira nodded, her voice quiet but sure. Thank you. Base was more than shelter, it was a world of its own, filled with light and movement, humans working, machines building, gardens growing under artificial suns, voices laughing in the halls. Not harsh, not hollow, but alive. Zira and her children were given a small room with soft beds and warm walls, food that tasted like hope, clothes that smelled like peace. Ray stayed nearby, watching, always guarding, never far. Days passed quickly, each one a page in a new story. The children played with others, their laughter strange but beautiful, their minds fast learning the human words, the human games, the human dreams. Zira sat in a quiet garden, listening to the sound of wind and leaves. Something her world never allowed, silence, not as punishment, but as rest. Ray joined her, sometimes bringing stories about Earth and its people, stories of wars and peace, of pain and healing, of mistakes and forgiveness. He never hid the dark, but always ended with light. One night Zira looked at the stars and whispered to Ray, they shine the same from here but feel different. Ray smiled and replied, maybe because here we look at them with hope, not fear. Council of Earth met in secret rooms to decide what to do with Zira and her children. Voices rose, questions sharp. Is she a danger? Is this a trap? What if they come for us? What if we are next? But one voice stood against them, a voice not loud but clear. Ray spoke for Zira, for her children, for the truth. He had seen her fight, not for power, but for love. He had seen her break chains, not to escape, but to protect. He said they are not like the ones who hunted them. They are something new, something better. Council listened. They argued, they hesitated. But in the end they agreed Earth would give them a chance. Zira was given a place among scientists, her knowledge deep, her ideas sharp, her heart open. The children went to school, learned quickly, made friends who asked about stars and flying and stories from other skies. One child drew a picture of their old world and burned it gently in the garden, letting the ashes fly into the wind. Another wrote a song about the stars and sang it under the moon, where no walls watched and no judges listened. Ray stayed with them like a shadow with light, never asking for reward, never claiming honor, just watching, just protecting, just smiling when they smiled. Zira once asked him why he cared so much. He looked at her and said, because someone once gave my people a second chance. I will not waste it. And so the days became weeks, and the weeks became roots deep in earth, deep in new soil where fear could not grow and chains could not return. Zira stood one morning with the sun on her face and the children running in the field behind her, and Ray walking with quiet steps beside her. She knew the Varelians were still out there. She knew danger could return. She knew peace was never forever. But she also knew something else, something stronger than fear, stronger than exile, stronger than war. She knew she was home. The sky above Earth was quiet that morning, full of golden light, the wind slow and warm, the kind of peace that feels like a deep breath before something begins. Zyra stood near a silver platform, her eyes watching the horizon, her children beside her, dressed in soft fabric, smiles on their faces, hands wrapped around small gifts, drawn with stars and dreams. Behind them stood Ray, calm and silent, a message in his hand from the Council of Earth, marked urgent, marked classified, but his face did not show fear, only focus. Zyra knew something had changed. She could feel it in the air, like static before a storm, not from Earth, but from the void beyond the stars, where old ghosts still moved, where the Varelians still whispered her name, not with pity, but with hate. The message was clear. A scout ship had entered a border zone. No response, no warning. Just a quiet move, like a shadow crawling under the door. Ray handed the message to Zyra, his eyes meeting hers. No words were needed. They both understood this day was not the end. It was the test. She looked at her children and knelt in front of them, her voice steady, her hands strong. We may need to leave, she said. Not forever, just for now. We will come back. We always come back. The children nodded, not with fear, but with trust. They had grown. They had learned not only from school, but from the silence. Between dangers, they were not weak. They were not broken. They were her light and her reason. A ship was prepared, small, fast, built with both Earth and Varelian technology, a bridge between two worlds that once hated each other, but now shared purpose. Ray would pilot, Zyra would guide the systems, and the children would stay behind in the care of those who loved them like family. Before she left, she recorded a message, her voice soft, her eyes bright, the room empty except for the light that followed her words. She spoke not to leaders, not to soldiers, but to everyone. My name is Zyra. I was born in a place where love was a curse, where feeling was a crime, where silence ruled everything. I was told I was unworthy because I cared, because I chose my children over tradition, because I believed in something more. I was thrown away, called a traitor, called a mistake, left to die on a dead moon. But then something impossible happened. A man fell from the sky, not with power, not with weapons, but with kindness. Did not speak my language, but he listened. He did not know my past, but he trusted my heart. Together we escaped. Together we survived. And together we found a new world, Earth, a place where hope is not forbidden, where pain is met with healing, not silence. Here my children play under the sun, without shame, without fear, without chains. Here I learned that second chances are not gifts. They are choices made by those brave enough to see people not as threats, but as souls. And now once again, we are called to choose. Varelians are near, maybe to fight, maybe to watch, maybe to end what they started. I do not know their plan, but I do know mine. I will not rooney, will not kneel. I will speak, I will stand, I will try. Because Earth gave me more than shelter. It gave me belief that the cruel can change, that the lost can return, that the broken can be more than their scars. So if you hear this, know one truth: we are not enemies, we are not experiments, we are not machines. Our mothers and fathers and children and dreamers, we are voices that sing even when the world tells us to be silent, and we will not be silent again. The message ended and was sent across open channels, open skies, open hearts. The ship rose through the clouds, Ray and Zyra, side by side, flying not into battle, but into the unknown, into the dark, with light in their minds and strength in their silence. The Varelian ship appeared cold, sharp, alive with order and fear, its weapons ready, its message simple: surrender or perish. Zyra opened communication, her voice calm, her presence firm. She offered peace, she offered truth, she offered her story. They laughed, they threatened, they moved to fire, but something unexpected happened. One voice from their ship, young, quiet, broken by doubt, asked a question. Why do we destroy what we do not understand? Why do we erase love? Why do we fear those who feel? and the silence after that. Question was louder than any weapon. The Varelian ship powered down turned slowly and left not with shame, not with fear, but with something they never had before. Question Ray turned to Zira and smiled. She looked at him and smiled back. They did not win a war, they lit a spark back on Earth. Her children waited, their arms full of drawings, their hearts full of stars, their voices ready to sing again, and this time the whole galaxy might be listening.